what are these topics that have been on your mind?
Well, I'm ready to get real weird with it too. Being out in the middle of the desert, going on vacation, traveling through like Utah, Nevada, like southern Nevada near like, Area 51 and going through the desert and the mountains, and it's just 15 hours in a car, your mind can go to some weird places, but it all kind of connected to what we were started to talk about towards the end last time. But it was one of those things where it's like, this is more of it's kind of like a tangent, a full blown tangent, but it leads into that, Okay. So I figured maybe we'll start with this because I really wanted to get down to like brass tacks. We keep starting at that surface level tit for tat area and diving deeper and deeper and deeper. And now I kind of want to go back to the other end, and kind of flower, start at the seed and flower it out and see where that brings us. And I know a lot of it is, it's going to come off as just my philosophy that you've heard before, and it's in my book. And, I'm probably not going to be able to recreate it as elegantly as I did before. Because like I said before, it's like my whole book was written in moments where I felt very creative. It's like I'm doing the dishes. I get on like a thought train and things just start popping into my head, and I stop doing the dishes and I start writing things down. It's just kind of like little epiphanies that come along the way, and I have to write it down in that moment because that moment is when it's happening.
Sure.
It's really hard to like force those lines of thought, or even like even if it's like reasonable stuff, it's really hard to connect the dots as easily as when I'm in those moments of just rapid succession of epiphany type thoughts, which is what I had for the past couple of days, coming back nice and rested from vacation. And now it's normal life is starting to settle back in, and it's like I'm trying to reach for them again and keep them nice and feeling fresh, but they're slowly fading away. So now's the time to capture them with you and see what you think about them. So I want to go on a little bit of a monologue, but then, and again, it's probably things you've heard before, but I want to set the stage before I get into the real weird stuff that I want to actually talk to you about. Okay. So I brought up that quote to you from Nikola Tesla, and I also kind of accompanied it with that video of the sun shooting through space, and then the Earth revolving around the sun, and kind of also following the sun as it shoots through space.
From the other day?
Yeah, the other day.
I did not perceive the video to be what you just described it as. And I don't think I got the quote. I don't know what quote.
Well,
let's tell the folks at home.
Yeah, let's start fresh. So the quote from Nikola Tesla is just his like most famous one, which is, if you wish to understand the universe, think in what is it? If you wish to understand the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration.
Yeah, I remember now. You did say that. Okay.
And, it's one of those things where you can interpret that about a million different ways, but most scientists and people in science can think about it in very specific scientific ways, right? But I feel that there's this kind of intuitive way that it's not that he was saying like literally think in energy, frequency, and vibration. Like you don't have to know that the atoms, the subatomic particles, and everything in tiny land follows specific. They're all just really ripples in some type of substrate, right? That's kind of what science has concluded, that there's different fields. There's the Higgs boson field. There's all the different subatomic particle fields, and the actual particles themselves aren't like physical things in these fields. It's just the field rippling, creating a vibration, right? Yeah. That's what we've come to think, and that's what most people assume is what Tesla meant when he stated that. I kind of think of it in a totally different way, where literally I think of everything as vibrations
Yeah.
and waves and energy patterns and frequencies, not just the things that make those larger physical objects as vibrations and frequencies.
Right.
And what I mean by that is it's hard to figure out where to start. So if I think, if I just think of, if I was to draw a wave pattern, a sine wave on a sheet of paper, and you have that neutral line that goes straight across, and then you have that wave that crosses over that neutral line in,
Right.
In some oppositional oscillation. It goes from on one side of the neutral line to the other side of the neutral line, and on and on and on, right? And it has some frequency, some vibration to it. It assumes some vibration, and that frequency is a value. Whatever that frequency is, that's the value of that sine wave. That's how you determine that sine wave against other sine waves, whatever. So you have this neutral line, neutrality, and then you have something crossing over it, which makes it a value, makes it exist. It's not, if it was on the neutral line, it'd be null. There's no reason to even talk about it. It's a neutral thing. Let's just skip over it. It's not affecting anything. It has no effect. It's not existing. It doesn't matter, right? So that's how you kind of see a sine wave in 2D. But the reason I sent you that video of the sun, and I've seen that video probably a billion times, and I've thought about this fact before, but I never kind of like molded it into what I'm trying to get to. So yeah, again, it's like, imagine the sun following a line through space, because the sun is actually moving through space as well. It's not like the sun is in a stationary point in space time and the earth is just revolving around it, and then we're all just doing the same thing in the same spot, right? The sun itself is moving through space.
Right.
It's moving.
It's got its own corkscrew motion.
Exactly, in the galaxy, and then in the whole universe. Like everything kind of moves in that direction, right? It's kind of like that wave. If you make that wave 3D, it's kind of like a guitar string, or the sun, or the earth revolving around the sun. There's a central point that the thing is revolving around. It's not that it crosses over that neutrality line. It's that it's going around the neutrality line, right? So that's how you can kind of think of that same exact sine wave in 3D instead of 2D. So you have the 2D and the 3D, same principles, exact same calculations, exact same everything, just the perspective of whether you're thinking about it in 2 dimensions versus 3 dimensions. The 2 dimensions, it crosses over and becomes the neutrality at certain times. 3D, it's not like the earth is going into the sun at any moment. Maybe it will in the future, who knows? But it's if you look at that, like you take out a section of that, it's revolving around its central point. So again, I'm going on a stretch here, and I'm gonna make some statements, but I'm gonna try to come back around and really explain them. But the way I kind of see that is, in 3D, there's never a point of neutrality. It's always existing. In 2D, there's points where it crosses over in the neutrality point and it's not existing on certain points. If we were to collapse that into 1D, one dimension, it's the fact that it's always existing and not existing all at the same time. Like, it has value, but it's fully within that non-existent still state that we've talked about many times. Like that still, that null point where it doesn't exist because it doesn't matter. It doesn't have any comparison. It doesn't have any oppositional forces to compare itself to, and it's in that null state, right? So that's kind of how I see it, is like, as you move up these dimensions, it's like everything's collapsed into a singularity where something and nothing is one thing, and it's existing in the same kind of simultaneous pocket of time and space, right? 2 dimensions, you start breaking that apart, and you do have value, but it does neutralize at certain points. And in 3 dimensions, that's when you're in 3 dimensions, that's why we have rock hard things. We see things. There's definite lines. There's definite things happening, and we can knock on them. And it's always, there's seemingly just existence. We don't experience non-existence, right? It's just everything is. And that's kind of like the sun, the earth revolving around the sun. The earth never goes into its central point. It remains outside of it, spiraling in that vibration, right? Spiraling in that frequency that it does. And so when I think of like everything as a vibration, there's specific aspects of what a vibration is, of what a frequency is, of what a wave is, right? There's an oscillation between opposites that makes it exist. There's a neutral point that it either revolves around or it becomes every once in a while, or it zeroes out. It's basically coupled with a neutral point, a null point, right? So it's like everything has to follow these very simple rules. And it's like, how does all complexity grow out of these very simple rules? And we've talked about it. You can think of it intuitively, just using your own mind. You don't have to know science. You don't have to be able to see the earth revolving around the sun. You don't have to even think about waves or anything like that. You can literally think about your brain. It's always a this for that. It's always like black and white, hot and cold. These relative relationships that have a whole spectrum in between that connect the two, and they actually even loop back around into each other. It's always this or that, this kind of oscillation between opposites. Everything has an opposite. Colors, anything within perception, within your perception, has to have an opposite for comparison, for it to exist, for you to be able to perceive it at all, right? So again, I'm going on this long-winded thing because I'm building up to something. It's like we've already talked about this. For people that want to get more in depth about it and really get confused, read my book and you can get that whole snapshot. Bodhi, you already know about this. I'm just trying to set the stage to lead up to it. But
I feel also like most of these points have come up in other episodes in like different words. So
exactly. And so and and I've been trying to relate it more to sound, because people usually can relate to sound more, like music, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I say everything, or when Nikola Tesla says everything is think of it as energy, frequency, vibration, right? I can kind of imagine sound being that way. Like when you play a chord on a guitar, not even a chord, let's start with just a string. You play a string on a guitar, and we've talked about this before. I don't know if it actually made it into any of the aired episodes, but when you play a string on a guitar, there's a fundamental frequency. Say the note is G. You're hearing the G, you're hearing the fundamental frequency. It sounds like one note. But the fact of the matter is there's an infinite amount of partial notes that are making up that note. If you were to look at the frequency spectrum on a graph, you'd see all these partial notes, not just G, but Fs and whatever notes are going up the frequency spectrum that are also coming out. Like you can distinguish those. If you were to, you can actually look at the graph and pinpoint, hey, that frequency is playing too, but why don't I hear that frequency? It's because the G that you're playing is kind of the culmination of all those frequencies put together. It's called the fundamental, right? It's what we perceive, even though that whole spectrum of color is happening. Mm-hmm. Now, when you play a chord, you're playing a G chord on a guitar, you're playing multiple strings. But again, you're hearing the G chord. You're hearing that one frequency, that one note. But you're playing multiple strings, playing different notes on multiple strings. It's creating, again, it's the same idea. It's this, and then each of those strings have those partials that it's just this ridiculous complex pattern. Mm-hmm. But you only perceive one dang thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, why does that even happen, right? Not only that, but I'm trying to circle it back around into the fact that, yeah, that fundamental frequency G is happening, and it's the culmination of everything that's a part of it. But that G is also a part of a larger symphony. And that keeps going on more and more infinitely. It spreads throughout space and time. That G chord that you're playing is part of the universe, which is also a vibration, right? So it's almost like everything is a single thing made up of other single things, but it itself is also making up a larger single thing, right? So it's turtles all the way down, whatever you want to call it. It's just fractals, whatever. So we've been there. I just wanted to bring up the sound thing because, again, it's like that's how I think of everything. Is it's a vibration that's eliciting a frequency. That frequency is what we perceive, but it's actually within it is an infinite amount of other frequencies, and it is part of a larger frequency that is the realm that it's in, right? It's the space that it's existing in. And you need that realm, you need other frequencies alongside it for that to even exist. Again, if you don't have perception, if you have nobody listening to that guitar chord, it doesn't even matter if it was strum or not, because it's just, it has no meaning. There's got to be something else outside of it. If that sound doesn't have space to go into it, there's nothing outside of it. Then that thing that is null. It doesn't exist. It's a still thing. It's nullified. So as I'm thinking about all this, and I'm thinking about the fact that, again, you go down to the atom, and when you think about vibration, it's not in the 2D, it's in the 3D. There's a central nucleus, and it's the particles are vibrating around it, right? It's just kind of the whole thing is like vibrating in space-time from a central point, kind of like you can think about it as like a sphere with a nucleus in the middle, and it's kind of like molding into different forms, depending on how many protons, neutrons, whatever it has, it's molding into different forms and seemingly creating the hard existence that we see around us in this realm. So everything below us is a vibration, and we're perceiving those vibrations as different things with different textures, different colors, lights, sounds. That the vibration is really the stimulus that's entering into us as the self. We're interpreting it as a certain way. It's building this picture that we see in front of us, and we interact within this realm. And really, it's just like the frequencies are creating us, the frequencies are around us. We're on kind of like this plane of existence that is part of a larger frequency, and its frequencies all the way down. It's all just ripples in space-time that are culminating into certain things which are existing within a realm of the frequencies culminating into different things, right? You with me so far?
I follow you.
Okay. So that's why I'm thinking, like, you look at that image of the sun, the Earth revolving around the sun, same thing. It's just, it's like the atom. It's just a larger version of that thing happened. You look at a galaxy, it's just space dust revolving around a central point. Again, you just expand that off, and it's just infinitely large, and it's going to keep going and going and going. So it's almost like there's one fundamental frequency of our universe, and then everything within it adds to that fundamental frequency. Our Earth is a fundamental frequency that we're adding to it. This reality is, this solar system, the atoms within our bodies, all the way down. Now, here's where the weird stuff comes in. If that wasn't weird enough, and again, the only reason I wanted to kind of start there and kind of flesh that out with you is because we've talked before where it's like, I don't want to just rely on science, like physics, and talk about how, scientists know that the atom is like this, or, we went out to space and we saw the Earth and the sun like this, and I haven't seen that. I don't know that for sure. So I do kind of like pepper it with the whole mental aspect, because that's how I kind of came to think about these things, is thinking about my own mind and how it works, and how, how could the universe have began? How can I think? Like, how are thoughts separate? How are there separate moments of time? How do I live as a being continually moving through time? You think about those things, and you kind of come upon this whole oscillation wave theory. You can, maybe some people don't,
Perhaps.
but perhaps. Yeah, exactly. Anyway, is there anything you want to say to that before I get into the real weird stuff?
The last thing that came to mind is you said that each frequency after the universal frequency is an addition to it. Why do you use that word?
It's not, and as soon as you said it, I'm like, that's not the best word, but I don't know if there is a good word. It's like, even though there's a fundamental frequency, everything within it is changing.
Right. Yeah.
But it's changing within certain parameters that keep that specific thing existing. So imagine you can strum a bunch of different guitar strings to create a G chord, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in different ways.
Right.
You can elicit a bunch of different variations of partials to get a certain note, but at the base, that fundamental frequency remains the same, right?
Right. That's why I meant, how can you add to it?
Yeah, exactly. If the add's not the right word,
I would just, I think it might just be like I don't know who does this, but this is also a wrong word, but like a selection from, whatever the buffet of frequencies could be. Yeah. It is selected somehow and then manifests according to those partials.
What I mean, the fundamental frequency is not, again, it's not a good word, and I bet you there's a better mathematical word for this. It's like they're the fundamental frequency is the sum of all those things. It's the apex.
That's somehow add, but
exactly. You kind of get what I'm saying. It's just
I get what you're saying. I think maybe the viewers at home, or the folks at home.
Can somebody chime in with the right word? A word we can use in the future to make that distinction. Yeah. But yeah. So add to it. I don't like that word either. Maybe it'll come to me later. Okay. So we're perceiving, and I like what you said there. Like, I don't know what or who does it, but who makes this recipe, like to create the fundamental frequency? Because it's exactly kind of what I'm getting to. Within these vibrations, we've created definite lines. Like, there is a specific sequence of atoms within your body right now that somehow creates the defined being that is Bodhi. Mm-hmm. There's some specific sequence of atoms that creates the table behind me. It creates every single thing, everything that we perceive to be singular, right? Mm-hmm. And what I want to get at is, and I think I've talked to you about this before. It kind of was triggered from one of our mutual internet acquaintances, Shapes Without Meaning. And that name, I even talked to him about that name. I was like, where did that name come from? Because I had a specific experience that name really called to me after that experience. And I was like, where did this name come from? Right. And he was like, I forgot. I even forgot what he said, because it was kind of like a minute, like, just, I don't know, sounded cool. Something like that. I don't think it was that insignificant, but it was something like, that wasn't very, it wasn't like a big epiphany or an experience he had or anything like that. But I told him about my experience. And if everything is a vibration, just ripples through space-time, eliciting some type of pattern that becomes a single thing that we perceive it as such. Our brain is trained through conditioning to recognize those lines. Mm-hmm. There has to be a way, if our brain already did this, there has to be a way to alter that conditioning to alter those lines, right? So imagine you have a volume of space, an arbitrary volume of space. Let's call it me, just the Rick space, the atoms within me, right? They're vibrating at a certain frequency. The vibrations and ripples are creating me, this singular thing. Imagine you just chop my face off right here. Just take all the atoms for half of my face and move and mix them with the atoms right here that are creating the air around me. Just imagine you drew a line right here, right? Sure. Make that a single thing. Uh-huh. And the reason I bring that up is because the Shapes Without Meaning. This one time I had an experience where I was in meditation with my eyes open. I like to kind of alternate, eyes closed. Actually, lately I haven't really been liking the whole eyes closed thing, just because of this one time that this happened. I had my eyes ajar. I'm looking straight ahead. I'm laying in my bed. So there's actually a big screen TV in front of me, which is the best thing to be meditating while looking at. There's a lamp and there's wall hangings and stuff like that. And after a while, your eyes get a little teary-eyed. You start kind of spacing out, right? Maybe you're even going a little cross-eyed. I don't know. You're not even paying attention to your eyes, so they do weird things. And the edges of things start blurring. The edges of the TV start blurring, which when it blurs, it kind of starts fusing with the things around it. The lamp starts molding into the TV. The TV starts blending in with the wall. Everything starts blending together, right? And then there was this moment where my brain knew that that was still a TV, even though it's blending. It knew that that was a lamp. But at some point, my brain decided, I'm not saying I decided, my brain just did this seemingly on its own, decided to forget what those things were. They were just shapes without any meaning. It wasn't a TV. It was just a square, And it wasn't even a square. It was like a blurry, ethereal square. And it molded with the lamp. And that became one thing. It's just like that's now a being within itself. It's not a TV and a lamp. It's some new thing. It's some new shape, some new identity, right? And same thing with the wall. Everything started molding and creating weird shapes that had no meaning to them. I forgot what they were. It was almost like I was a baby, a clean slate. Just forget all your conditioning, whatever all of this is to you, forget all of that. Let's just put that aside. Now let's start bringing some of the aspects of it and putting them together and making new things, right? Eventually, and I don't know, I wrote this in my book. It was a little more fresh in my mind at the time. So there was some point where it was almost like I realized that this was an alternate dimension. Like, this is what is meant by an alternate dimension. It's taking the aspects that are already there, the elements that are already there, the ripples in the space-time that are already there, but rearranging them in a way that your perception isn't conditioned to do inherently, and rearranging in a way where you see a new world, you see something new. And it was almost like, it's funny because what it felt like is it was almost like I pushed my face through like some kind of weird space medium, and I popped it out the other side, kind of like, Ace Ventura, Pet Detective, when he comes out of the rhino. That's kind of like what it felt like. It was just like kind of like reaching through, and I like pushed, and it was this really weird feeling where my brain, it was kind of like it was on hyperdrive. It was like it's almost like I could feel the neurons firing in my skull, and everything was just, it's like I couldn't just see the flat surface of the thing, but I could see behind it. I could see within it. I could see above it. I could see every angle of it all at the same time. And I was like, I literally thought to myself, I'm in an alternate dimension right now. I finally have done it. But as soon as I had that thought, that's what shot me back down, and I wasn't in it anymore. It was kind of like, that recognition brings you back down to reality. Right. And that was such a profound experience that I was like, I want to get back there, but I have no idea how. Like, that was so organic. It just kind of came to me. It just all happened by itself. I wasn't pushing for it. I wasn't practicing for it. It just, boom, I'm there. And I'm like, this is what it's like. And then I come back down and I'm like, how the heck do I get back there? Right. Mm-hmm. I have even more weird stuff to come off of that, but have you ever had an experience like that? Have you ever thought about, actually, and the reason I want to bring this up is because I heard it in a Joe Rogan podcast where somebody literally asked him, I think it was, I don't even remember. Somebody asked him, what's this whole interdimensional alien travel thing? Like, what does that even mean? And Joe Rogan's like, I just think it's a funny word that people throw around to sound smart, even though it doesn't actually mean anything. Like, what does it mean to travel interdimensionally? And as soon as he said that out, it's one of those moments where you're like, I wish I was on the podcast. I'd be screaming at them right now. I'd be like, this is what it means. It means to literally alter dimensionality of things and create anew from what's already there. We live in the 3-dimensional world. You can get very literal. We live in the 3-dimensional world. I can't see what's on the other side of this wall. That's a whole nother dimension. If I was able to see this wall as the surface and what's on the other side of the wall, that's a whole nother dimension I'm seeing. It's kind of like a new whole. It's a new thing, even though it's the same thing.
Yeah.
You get
That's what I was going to say. I think it's the same thing. I don't know if it's... I wouldn't have chosen these words that you are... I understand why you chose these words, but I don't know if it would be like interdimensional travel per se, because what traveled really? And it was an organic thing. I think what happens is that somehow our senses get beyond the conditioning and we just see it from a different dimension, a different vantage point. Simple as that. I don't think anything, like if it was an apple that I was looking at and I saw it become the sky around it or whatever, I mean, however new I'm seeing it, I think that's that note or whatever. That's just the frequencies of that thing we don't see all the time. But it's always there. So nothing like really changed except for the perception, I would say.
Yeah. And I get what you mean there, and I'm going to do my normal thing of like, yes, but also no.
Yeah.
Which is when you say like, there's no traveling there. For me to see the opposite side of the wall, they're technically in 3D, there is a traveling. I cannot see the other side of the wall unless I walk around it and go see it, right?
I guess I hear what you're saying. I guess when you hear the word like interdimensional travel, and you hear that, it conjures up like, Star Trek, like, and, leaving here, going there or whatever. I don't think it's necessarily like that. If, like you said, if it was, you feel like something, a door opened up, right? Or portal. Yeah. Then you could think of it, metaphorically, as if a black hole opens right where you are. Maybe it passes through you or over you or whatever. Like, I don't think that you're going anywhere else. I think that there's like a perception that is opened up, but I don't know if when you say another dimension, like you think it's not here, but I think it is.
It is here. Yeah.
So I just wanted to clarify that, like when you say the word, interdimensional travel, you just think like, in this other way. And I want to clarify that.
Yep. And I completely agree. From the standpoint that I was thinking about it before, again, it's not like I'm disembodying and going somewhere. It's not like I'm leaving my body behind and going to this alternate dimension. The self is still in that same position in space-time. It's still in that relative position. You're just seeing your environment in a new way, right?
Right.
But let me get into the real weird stuff. And this is, again, I'm going to start not talking about things I know, but things that I feel are possible. I'm going to get real science fiction-y, but it's just fun stuff to talk about. And it's kind of like, it was the jumping off point from here. It was like, and it really, again, it was brought on by driving past Area 51 in Nevada. Listening to, I also listened to the Lex Fridman podcast with, I think his name's Daniel Fravor. He's the guy that saw that Tic Tac UFO. He's the Air Force pilot that saw the Tic Tac UFO and, kind of came out not too long ago. His
name sounds familiar. Yeah.
Anyway, so, and again, it's the whole interdimensional travel thing. And this is what the travel is really the sticking point. And that's why I want to bring this up. I was thinking, again, bringing us back to the whole, everything is a frequency, everything is energy, everything is vibration. We're living in a reality that has a fundamental frequency. We're in an existence. I am talking to you within this realm, whatever this is, Earth, call it universe, the culmination of everything I know that I've experienced and been in contact with, right? That's my reality. That's my realm. And like I said, imagine you took pieces of that realm and you saw them from a new perspective by singling out other random volumes of space. Mm-hmm. So essentially what I'm saying is, and I've heard many people say this, but it's one of those things where you go, that's just kind of like one of those hippy dippy principles, those woo woo type things that people say, but don't actually understand. And it's like, well, maybe actually I didn't understand it at the time. Maybe let me think about that. So it's the whole shifting your frequency, or shifting the frequency of the world around you, or, people always say like elevating yourself, going into higher frequencies, having a higher frequency mind, stuff like that, right?
I mean, I think that you do agree with that. I think, again, it comes down to, and I'm like, I can see into what you're kind of saying right now. We've talked about this. I feel like this too, and stuff like that. I think it just comes back to like the wording, or like the implication, or at least the feeling that you think people get of the implication.
Exactly.
Because I mean, we've talked about the placebo effect and all that kind of stuff. And if that's not like shifting your frequency or whatever, like, there's some ways. Like, I believe in that stuff, but
well, it's like, even from the scientific aspect, you literally are like your biology is changing, things are changing, but again, there still is the frequency of the self, which is Rick. There's some parameters by which the things inside me change, but I remain the same.
Right.
So that's how I kind of think about it. I am a certain chord. There's a bunch of different notes being played within me, and maybe those notes change, but the fundamental frequency is still Rick along that same. So again, our reality is a fundamental frequency. That now, the reason I bring up that whole take a random volume of space and make that one thing. Imagine there's a whole nother, and this isn't a new idea. Imagine there's a whole nother realm, a whole nother fundamental frequency overlaid to the top of ours, where there are other beings existing that are the culmination of the vibrations that are already there. They're already existing. The atoms are already vibrating at these things. It's just the lines that are drawn differently, right?
Now, this is super interesting. Hold on real quick here, because this, if there was ever like, this would fit in really good with a flat earth argument, man, because you'd ask like, how would aliens come about or whatever? And I've heard, man, that, one of these people who's, an abductee story was saying that the Greys are basically human beings from the future, like us evolved to the point where, and then they sort of,
my rant.
Okay. Yeah. So they sort of like, they shift into our perception, but they're basically like at the same, they didn't really travel anywhere, really. They just kind of turned around in place or whatever.
And this is how I got there. I just want to, again, no, great. I'm glad you're getting what I'm putting down, and you're literally jumping ahead 32 pages. So yeah, okay. So there's that realm that's kind of just it's inlaid, it's overlaid on top of ours, right? Mm-hmm. It is the higher vibration. You could say higher, lower, adjacent. I don't even care about the word. There's just a whole nother realm that is a different frequency than ours, and there's lower. Just a tangent. I never even thought about this point. Maybe that's what time is just the shifting of frequencies, possibly. But okay, put that tangent aside. You have this whole other realm where beings can exist in a world that is completely different than ours, different physics, different ideas, different movements, different things. But again, those frequencies are the same. It's just those lines are drawn differently. So it's almost like if you shifted everything 1 inch to the left and drew those lines right next to us, that's what I'm talking about. It's like, and when I think about that experience where I peered into that other dimension, and when I talk about interdimensional travel, that's what I'm saying is like, imagine there was a way to take the vibration that is Rick and alter it in a way. Maybe you go, I'm at 75.1 hertz and I go 75.2, And all of a sudden, because I have altered my vibration in a way that is outside of my current realm, I popped into that other one, right? It's like now I've taken on something, I've let go of something, I'm in this other realm, and now I have traveled to a different fundamental frequency, grand fundamental frequency. The totality of it all, the frequency that is the totality of all has shifted, and now I'm in some other realm, right? And like you said, maybe that's how aliens pop in and out. Maybe that's why we don't see them ever. Just for some reason, some people get in tune with whatever that is, and then boom, you can see them, and then boom, you can't. And they can do, because it's like they're altering the vibrations within space-time, right? They're not actually physically traveling, using our 3D realm that we're in. They're over in 4D, 5D, 6D, 7D, 12D, infinite D.
Right.
Just they pop in there, they can pop in, they can pop out, they can do whatever the heck they want, right?
Right. Yeah.
And what you said right there about the whole, maybe it's us in the future. Maybe the Greys are, they got the big eyes because we can see more, tiny lips because we can hear each other's thoughts. There's no reason to have a mouth anymore. Small noses because we've taken in less oxygen because we've ruined our Earth over time with climate change. Who knows? There's that theory, and I really liked that one. Especially with this point that imagine there was a way to train myself to get back there, to let go of the conditioning that has been imposed on me by this 3-dimensional reality, travel through those other dimensions. We don't even have to say travel, experience other dimensions. I have that experience again where I can see both sides of the wall. I can see the full picture. I can see outside of myself, the house I'm in, everything, right? And over time, I conditioned myself to experience those things. Maybe that's going to drive some people crazy. Maybe
I got some questions for that, man.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, is that experience, all right, if you're talking about the experience, whatever you want to call it, the experience happens when something happens with conditioning. The boundaries are gone beyond experience. If the experience is to be repeated and in the process becomes a new conditioning, then it is no longer that same release. Because the release was beyond conditioning and you make it a condition, you really can't. Right. So that's one point. But in considering can you get back and how would you do it? And that's a real big point, I feel like. Is that if you're going to put it back into conditioning, it's not going to, that will nullify it, I think.
It's kind of evolution, though. Like that, you're introducing new factors that you have to integrate into what is already there, so you don't completely abolish the system that is already there. You don't completely get rid of it and start fully anew. It's like you're dipping your toes in that water of starting fully anew, but you're taking it back and you're integrating that into what you already are. And then you're going back in and you're taking it back and you're integrating a little bit more. So now you have a little bit more of an understanding. You're a little bit more in that realm. I feel like, again, that's why people go crazy, is because they go all in and they get lost because they fully released the self and there's nothing to take that and puzzle it back together. It's like, it's harder to puzzle back together. You have to take baby steps and integrate. And the only reason I say you have to do that, not that you have to, we always talk, you don't have to do anything, but I tend to listen to the what existence already does, which is it evolves in a very slow, meticulous fashion. But also within that slow, meticulous fashion, there's giant leaps. And also it throws so many variables at itself that it has it has possibility on its side. It has probability on its side. It's like, I'm going to throw all this craziness at it, and 3% of the time something's going to stick that is worthwhile, and it sticks because it helps that thing survive through time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when listening to evolution and thinking about evolution, it's again, it has to be integrated. It has to be, you can't just throw everything away and start anew.
I think you could also, just in the same way you don't have to do anything. I don't think you have to. Like, well, you don't have to return either with it integrated or not. You don't even have to return. If you
don't even have to return again. But then, maybe your body's floating somewhere down in Skid Row in LA.
Well, I was thinking about like a mountain somewhere, but
yeah. It's just, again, it's the Ishtak-Bentov principle. It's like, there's the bell curve. There's the most of the people at the height of that bell curve that's where the normal people are, right? The people that are like kind of fully integrated into this 3D realm that don't venture outside of this dimension. And then there's that small sliver at the future of the bell curve of the people that are dipping their toes in. And there's the people at the very edge of that bell curve that are like, they're just going all in. They're gone, right? And it's usually the people right before the end of that bell curve that are the ones actually affecting the rest to help them move along that evolutionary line, into the future, right? So you can go out, man, and but I just think it's a little. No other word is coming to mind, so I'm just gonna. It's kind of like selfish. You're not helping to bring stuff back to move along the whole system.
I don't know. I mean, I think. So everything there's a one big frequency of a bigger whatever, and down, and there's one for the world and there's one for all of humanity, right? Yeah. There's a frequency of that in which we are all unique notes or chords, what have you. But in the frequency of humanity, if it happens, if something like that if that is accessible to me, then whether I say anything when I return, if I return or not, it still will definitely have an unspoken effect evolutionarily for all of humanity.
Oh yeah.
So whether or not the person is selfish, it's still going to affect what the chord frequency or progression or whatever you want to call it,
even of yourself too. That. Even of yourself, like it's going to have a very, it's just going to have a larger effect on you. Again, I'm just, if you played it safe, right. And it's not, and again, I can't even control this. It just happens to me in a meditative bout. I haven't even returned back there since I've been there. Mm-hmm. Trying to figure that out, right? How do I get back there? And we've talked about that before. It's like, generally when you're meditating or you're coming on some type of enlightenment or stuff, you levitate, random stuff happens to you. And you go, how do I get back there? And most of the time you just can't. Those are just kind of just like little offshoots where that's not the way. That was a cool thing and all. That's not the way.
Sure.
So basically what I was getting about the whole future thing is, imagine I am able to practice getting back to that space or following that path, right? Mm-hmm. And now we're just talking about enlightenment, right? We've talked about that before. You're going on the path towards enlightenment, random stuff happens, you see random things, blah, 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 blah. So the aliens was kind of like the first weird thing. It was like, oh, I kind of get it now. Mm-hmm. Interdimensional travel. I get what that term means. I understand. And maybe I did that. And that's cool, right? So the second weird thing that I thought about was reincarnation. And I was thinking about the fact that if I was able to, anytime you do something, it alters your DNA. It alters your psyche. It alters your biology. Anything you do in this world, it changes you in some way. It changes the vibrations within you in some way, right? So if I was to continually do this to clean my slate and go into other dimensions, and it's changing my biology, it's literally changing me as a being.
Right.
I then have sex and create a child that has my DNA. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of the apex of everything that I've done in my life. I've created these conditioned responses. I've created this DNA pattern that allows the child to be born with instincts, with intuition, with inherent guidelines of how to move throughout this realm and all that good stuff. And I did it with somebody else. Somebody else is also contributing to this thing, this one being, right? So I was like, and we've talked about before about, I talked to you about my whole theory about there's kind of like three things that happen when you die. There's number one, you are the all, you become the all. Number two, you're in a cycle where you're because your life has to exist within the totality of the timeline. It just keeps cycling back into itself. And then there's the linear timeline, which is you just die and it's black and there's nothing after that, right? But then I was thinking about the reincarnation, because we talked about that before, reincarnation and what that actually means. And we had a lot of good ideas in that other podcast. But here's one I haven't had before. I was like, what if my child is literally my reincarnation? So this self that I think of as Rick, it's 100% Rick right now, right? Eventually it's going to be 50% of something, And we think linearly, where I'm thinking this 100% Rick is going to stop existing, and then it's kind of going to magically go into something else. It's just going to kind of this 100% Rick is going to transfer into something else, right? My biology, my thoughts, experiences and stuff. What if that's not separated? What if thoughts and biology and experience, it's not separated? Literally, my DNA is being placed into this new vessel. It is living alongside of me for some time, right?
Yeah.
But who's to say that that's not also like, there's not this state of Rickness that's living within that thing that's then moving into the future and passing on the Rickness over and over and over again until eventually somebody decides I'm not going to have children, and then the Rickness is gone. It gets passed in other things, but you know what I'm saying? Like literally that is the closest thing to reincarnation I can possibly have.
Yeah.
The Rick that moves through time is not the same Rick at any point in time. We're like a river. We're the same river, but we're always changing. I have different biological makeup. I take on new experiences. I grow. I become new things. I grow a beard, hair. I change. Maybe my arm got lopped off at some point. Those are very obvious things, but there's little things inside. My gut bacteria changes. My cells reproduce. My cells become new things. It's like we are not the same thing at any one point in time. Our biology, even though I feel this Rickness, it's always changing. And then that biological extension goes into my kid.
Okay.
And then that, to me, is probably the closest thing that it comes to reincarnation, is my literal biological extension is living alongside of me. I perish. It continues on. It keeps extending that lifeline.
Sure. I just had something. I had a couple thoughts here. It's just not the same, though. For one thing, it's not the same. It's no real answer for what people are asking about when I talk about reincarnation.
Yeah. No, I get that. Yeah.
Right. Well, here's the main question: is how much of the Rickness has to do with your biology? How much of the Rickness is in the biology? Because like you can, like this thing, it looks like you, it might sound, it's all those things. Yeah, it's like partially like you, similar to another life, another version of yourself. But like at other cases, there's kids that are like, nothing like that, not like their biology, or there's tons of factors. So like, where is the Rickness? That's, I guess, I don't know how much of it is in the biology. Like you were saying, like there's limitations, and although like my arm might get cut off, or this thing will get old, it kind of always will look like a version of the same constant thing or whatever. But is that the Rickness? I don't know. Yeah,
that's again, there's a reason I'm going with the whole reincarnation thing. And actually, isn't that there's a principle in there somewhere from some ancient teaching about Well, it really is just reincarnation, about the fact that you get reincarnated because you are supposed to, help me out here. It's not attain something. It's
Well, I mean, I don't know what ideology you're referring to, but I mean,
why would you be reincarnated?
Because you are in the cycle of karma, and to repay that, to work that off or whatever, which means action. Karma means action. So yeah, you said it earlier, and I was going to bring up karma too. I mean, you were saying anything you do or say or think or whatever completely changes you all the time. That's karma all the time. So, I mean, that became, I think, like as an extension, like the answer for what happens when you die. Like, well, that momentum keeps going into something. It must.
Yeah, but the momentum. There's a momentum there.
But really, again, though, like how much is? I mean, like I created the momentum, and while I'm the cord or whatever, I might, there are wave repercussions because of those actions within my experience of it. And if my consciousness turns off in death and the motion still goes, who's to say I have to follow along with it?
Yeah.
It might cause, you could say like Hitler's karma, is still moving in the world or whatever, but like, is he in it? Is Hitler in it? Or is it just the wave, the residual stuff going on? So again, like, where does the soul begin and end?
Exactly. Where does it begin? If we're all just the ripples in space-time, and anything you do is it's like ripples extending from yours. The ripple that is you is just extending from yours. Where do you begin and end?
Well,
yeah. And that's so. And the whole reason I bring up reincarnation again is your biology. I'm just going to stick with the biological aspect for a minute, because there's that momentum, like you said. It's kind of like, again, I practice this whole interdimensional travel idea, right?
Mm-hmm.
Those conditioned responses are now ingrained in my DNA, which I then pass to my child. He or she is going to now have these conditioned responses, hopefully, that they may be able to build off of. That it's not like they have to start from zero. There's already some kind of plan there, right? And maybe there's something greater than that. Maybe they don't want those conditioned responses because they could have found some other different conditioned responses that are better than the one I'm trying to impose on them. Whatever. But imagine I raise my child and they tell me of the weird things that they see, which happen to kind of be a culmination of things around them,
Mm-hmm.
And you emphasize building that, like cultivating that within them. You say, oh, there's, imagine we knew for a fact that there was interdimensional travel, and this is how you get to it. Mm-hmm. You alter your brain chemistry, you alter your perspective on things, and that's as simple as that. You just alter your perspective on things, get rid of the conditioned responses that produce your current perception of things, and you alter it so that it can kind of see into these other realms, right?
Right, but I just want to say, I think the term is linchpin here is in the what are you going to do with the conditioned responses? And that's like one facet. The other things you said were quite simple: change perspective, chemistry, etc. But it has to do with the Rickness thing. It's like, well, where is that conditioning, and who's going to uncondition what? How's that going to happen? Can that be done in an unconditioned fashion? So many questions involved with that.
I kind of see it again. It's like the wave. Those are two opposite things: the conditioning and the unconditioning. There's two opposite things, and you do want to perpetuate the same system. You want to balance going between the two.
Say that again now.
So if you think about that neutrality line, you think about a two-dimensional wave going over the neutrality line, right? On one side of the line is conditioning. On the other side of the line is unconditioning. X, negative X. The wave itself is the system that I'm trying to keep, that I'm trying to perpetuate. The conditioning, unconditioning, so that I can
then
wipe the slate clean, reorganize things in a way.
How do you wipe the slate clean? That's the question. And
that
so I
is
guess
the question.
That's the main question involved here. I think.
How do you condition unconditioning? Yeah, that's.
Well, you can't condition unconditioning, but how can you uncondition conditioning? Because you are the conditioned thing. And so all you will do could be conditioned. So how do you act freely in order to get yourself free is the question. And so like a lot of people always brought this up with Krishnamurti. So like, or, he would bring it up as an example, like because I think at the time, Gandhi, those are parallel happenings. And so like the nonviolence that Gandhi talked about, people would bring that term to Krishnamurti's talks. And he'd always kind of like ridicule it. Like the idea of nonviolence is just a response of violence. And if you are a violent person and you see that you're violent and you say, I'm going to be nonviolent, you will impose upon yourself, you will constrict yourself to change, but it will be a violent means. And the means have to be identical to the end, is what Kay always said. And so that's why I said, it's like you have to be free to get free, because the means have to be the end.
Exactly, because imposing something on yourself to change is actually a form of violence in itself. So, yeah, exactly. So,
so you didn't even ever get out of conditioning if you go about it that way.
Exactly.
So like that's why the question is super important. Like what are you gonna do inwardly to get at least like your condition comfortable enough to possibly like peek through again? That's what we're talking about, and it's because the conditioning of perception keeps us from that. So
if we could answer that question by the end of this, Bodhi, I would be so happy, because that's exactly what like I said multiple times, I went there once, man, and I have no idea how to get back there. And but let me finish. Let me get to the end of this whole rant, and maybe there's something in there that can help you, because this does have an ending. It loops back around.
Okay.
The reason I say you move between the conditioning and unconditioning is because imagine I pop my head through, I see something in that realm, and I'm in a specific, another dimension, right? I'm in this other specific dimension, whatever that is. I come back out. I bring that, I integrate that. I kind of know, I know it's there. Step one, I know it's there. I know it's possible. I did it. It's there. I know for myself at least. Someday I get back there and I go, there's like another little thing where it's just like, maybe this is how I got back there. Maybe this is how I got into this other dimension, right? I come back and I go, that's a thought. I'm going to keep that with me. I'm going to integrate that. I do it again, and I find that it does bring me back there. Maybe it brings me to a different dimension. Maybe it brings me to the same space. Who knows? I have no idea. This is all brand new to me, right? But I keep going into that kind of, somehow I get into that unconditioned space, which we're going to put that aside. I have no idea how. Your guess is as good as mine. But the more I go there, the more my conditioning becomes being able to go into another dimension. I don't even know that's possible. I didn't even know that was possible before. I was just stuck here, right? Mm-hmm. But now I know it's possible. I keep going back there. So what I'm saying is like that's evolution, is kind of seeing this really random event, or having this really random experience, or taking on something really random and finding the benefit of it, latching onto it, using that, integrating it, and then you use that to make yourself greater, and then you keep doing that over and over and over again. You keep reaching out into the chaos, grabbing something, putting it into your order, and then moving along and grabbing more chaos and ordering it, and chaos and ordering it and chaos. And that's the conditioning, unconditioning, going back and reaching into that chaos and bringing it back into the order and making yourself greater than you already are. Mm-hmm. Then I pass that on to my child, because my life has to end at some point. Maybe I don't even reach to that point where I can regularly go past, right? So let's get to the alien part. in the future, after I cultivate this with my child, it becomes a tradition. The child cultivates it with their child. That child cultivates it with their child, and it just keeps going on. And it keeps. Now we reach some point where like one of the iterations can freely travel interdimensionally. They can just instantly, I'm in this other space. I can see multiple sides of things. I can see multiple perspectives. I can see things people don't. I can hear things people don't. I can, the vibrations. I end up disassociating my conditioned responses from said vibrations. I can kind of get into the vibrations themselves and alter them to my command, alter my my perception of them to my command.
Or just, right? I wouldn't even put it like that. There would be, the perception would alter for sure. Let's just keep it at that anyway.
The perception it's not like I'm altering the thing in itself. The thing in itself is still the thing in itself.
Or even vice versa. I mean, nothing
actually alters, really. You're just, it's kind of like we've many people have brought this up. Like when you take psychedelics, people are like, oh, it's like adding things, right? It's like you're seeing new colors and you're seeing new things. And some people go, no, it's actually the opposite. It's stripping away your conditioning. So you're actually seeing how the thing actually looks, but your brain limits the stimulus and breaks it down into a fundamental frequency. It breaks it down into fundamental aspects that the current evolution, the current state of your brain can actually perceive without your head exploding. Like literally, you can only, your brain has a certain capacity to take in a certain amount of information. If you take any more, you get overloaded. You'll get a migraine. You probably need to lie down, go to sleep, get exhausted, whatever. You have limited resources. You can only take in certain information. So psychedelics seem to kind of strip away that facade, like literally now you're actually seeing the colors floating, like literally floating through space. You're perceiving, when you look at a something and you see a color, that's literally just light vibrating a certain frequency off of that surface and into your eyeball, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now that frequency is telling you what that color is. Your brain is perceiving it as a certain color, but it's actually just a frequency. It's just a ripple in space-time. And so now it's stripping away that assumption of your brain. And it's just showing you, no, actually, it's all just random ripples. There actually is like blue and yellow in front of your face. You just don't see it right now, because if you did, your head would explode and you wouldn't know how to survive in this reality,
Yeah.
So again, I train myself to do that, to see other dimensions, train my child. Eventually, if you can kind of think of, it's like Ishtak Bentov says, those are the geniuses. Those are the people at the forefront of evolution, people that we think are crazy, that can peer into these aspects of life that most normal people do not. You just have to have the ability to bring it back with you, or else you're seen as crazy. You're putting it into an institution, and because you can't function within normal society, right?
Mm-hmm.
So again, basically this is the ending, is that is exactly what you said. In the future, this idea of interdimensional travel through dimension. Okay, when we talk about a dimension, I've been talking as if I'm just talking about space right now. Like again, volumes of space, you change them, you alter them, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. Time is also a dimension.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the same concept, impose that on time. And if you can travel through dimensions spatially, you can also travel through dimensions by time. And that was kind of like the apex of my whole thought, is like, maybe aliens are our future selves that we've evolved into and can travel through space and time dimensionally using nothing but our minds. And it's like you're projecting these frequencies onto things. And that's why they come, they kind of seemingly come in and out and do weird things and move in ways that we can't. And well, they're in different dimensions, and you're seeing like little snippets of them. Maybe it's not even their full form, maybe it's just like what our brains could interpret from that frequency that they're imposing on things, right? And so again, it's like, the evolution of man is to get into these other dimensions, travel through time, and eventually come back and kind of start showing ourselves how to do it. And now you're in a time loop, and now you're in one of those shows like Dark, or so an episode of Twilight Zone or whatever, where it's like, space-time continuum laws and whatever. But yeah, so these are the types of things I think about while driving through the desert. And so the question is exactly what you already brought up. And after that long whole ordeal, that's the exact question I wanted to bring up. How the heck do I get back there again?
Yeah. So I had something before. It'll surely come back up. But I guess an easy way to put it is I'm reading this book right now. It's called The Enlightenment Intensive. You heard of this?
No. Who's it by?
I'm not sure. The thing is, it was invented by a couple in the 70s, this way to this place we're talking about right now. But like the book was written by somebody later, and it was put out by somebody re-put out recently. So I don't know. I didn't really look into it.
It's basically like the Bible. Somebody experienced it, somebody wrote it down, and another person produced it.
I don't know. No, it's actually not. I mean, I think this is something super different and interesting because the person who wrote it experienced what the Bible said. He wasn't just an interpreter of it. He was a participant in this technique and experienced what you described, what tons of other people describe. So this is it's a process that it's not completely different than what we're doing right now, and how we were talking about conversation as a way to find a synthesis, in the sort of the Greek way of communicating, with the dialectic and all that. So this couple who made it up, I think it's a Latin word or a Greek word or something, but it's dyad, which means two. So two people singing across from each other. And there's like rows of us, of partners talking to each other for 3 days, seclusion, and you are contemplating a universal question out loud to another person who is not interrupting you or judging you. They just ask, so the question might be, who am I? So if I know that's your question, I will say, tell me who you are. And now you have 5 minutes to pick your own brain and try to look into what it is that is looking, who is the one. And for 5 minutes back and forth for like 45 minutes or 40 minutes. But then many of these throughout the day for 3 days. And I don't know, they don't really give a number in the book, but a lot of people have breakthroughs, like enlightenment experiences, like a significant amount, like more than, if you just, we talked about this in another episode, I think, Krishnamurti said that he never got anyone turned on. He never fulfilled his work. That's how he thought of it, at least. Whereas this book is talking about, like, they're saying, like, don't go, if you're going to do this, they still hold these enlightenment intensives. Don't think like you're gonna, like this is a guarantee. Of course, it can't be like that, but it's a successful process for the Western way of dealing with, your inner world, I guess. We're not from the Far East, like hundreds of years ago, you know what I mean? We don't have that kind of natural inclination. We're outer people more so as a culture. So it's hard for us to kind of get into that place more naturally. And so the prescription, to just sit silently and whatever, that's one way. Whereas what they're doing is, catering to people who are thinking a lot and they want to think it, or, you know, use that to get through it. And so they were describing it at, like, if I feel that I'm speaking with, you know, no, I don't know, danger of being interrupted or being judged or whatever, and I get some of this, it has an emptying effect, so that, you know, all these thoughts that are flying through your head and you're trying to get to this place, but talk them out, spew them out, get past them, get deeper down into this quieter, more spacious spot where something may happen. But I think, which all in all, I'm super interested in that that direction right now. But even like, this is best case scenario. Like, in, you know, if you're gonna, from K to this book or whatever, these methods or whatever, this is best case scenario of you know, whatever. But that doesn't mean, like, even if you took one intensive and you had a breakthrough and you do it again, you might not have a breakthrough again.
Yeah. And
so, like, even in the best case scenario, it's not like a sure thing.
Yeah.
I don't think.
Well, it's, you know, that exactly. That's kind of not the issue, but it's, you know, there's been times where I'll be taking a bath and I'm looking at the wall straight in front of me, you know, the subway tile with the little faucet, the round faucet right there. And again, eyes agape, got nothing to do but stare at this wall, got some nice music playing, whatever. And the colors start swirling, kind of like around, you start seeing the, you know, it's the white subway tile, and you start seeing kind of like the colors just floating off, and then the faucet starts getting real blurry, and then you just start kind of things get real intense, and then, you know, that's when your mind starts really calming, and it just kind of, again, it happens very naturally. It's like, I had no intention of doing this right now, but it's happening and I'm not going to stop it. So it's like, let's go here. Let's do this now. You know, let's have this fun. And it happens a lot, you know, every once in a while I'll get in that state. I'll be in that calming experience by myself, not talking with anybody, doing anything. Right. But I never heard of that. And I'm actually very interested in that. You should send it to me. I'll link it. Because it's kind of like, I feel like we almost touched on that a long time ago in our emails about, I was very much on the side of, this is something we should be able to reason. Not like reason through in the fact that I can say something to you and you understand it completely. And, you know, kind of like Kay says, there's no words. You can't really, you can describe it all you want, but it may very well be that the person sitting across from you is not ever going to get it. You know, there's no words you can say to just make them get it. You have to keep pointing and just pointing and pointing. And at some point, maybe they see it and now they actually do understand. And that's kind of where I like that idea of, again, it's like it's kind of what I do to myself, you know. There's that, in my brain, I have that question, who am I? And then there's a thing that answers. There's the same thing that asks the question, who am I, answers that question, right?
What does it say?
And every once in a while, and that's kind of like what I call reason. That's literally like you're playing out the scenarios. Well, maybe this, maybe that, maybe this, maybe that. But then every once in a while, you get into that state where maybe you ask that question so much that it's just an innate, inherent question within yourself that you're just always asking, and your brain is used to asking it. You know, you've conditioned your brain to always be asking, who am I? And you get to that calm place, and then all of a sudden your brain, seemingly without you even trying, answers. And it's just like this flash of an insight. This is who you are, right?
Well, I've never had that. I've never had that insight. I guess my question is what answers that are necessarily going to be the incorrect answer for a very long period of time until you get to that stage where organically happens. What are the answers that are definitely wrong all up until that point? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't even know what to answer when I think about that question. I'm like, I'm reading this book and it, it's not telling me every single, they call it the Enlightenment technique. And so they're showing cases of people who've taken this and they're saying things like, am I doing the technique right? And on paper, I don't really understand what it is, but like, for sure, like the whole time you're doing it, you're giving this answer and say, oh, that's not that. You keep giving, but what? I don't even have definite answers. It's hard for me to find those answers in the first place, to go beneath. Anyway.
Again, it's one of those things you can't put into words, but it sounds so cliche. The right answer, you'll know the right answer when it comes.
Right.
And then you'll realize at that point that every other answer was actually the right answer the whole time. It just wasn't accompanied by that feeling.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even like the word feeling.
Understanding or realization.
Understanding, knowing, feeling. They're all subpar words, and they always will be, but they're the closest thing you can say to this. It's almost like a confidence, again, bad word. It's like a confidence where it's like, there it is. It's like, let me riff on this for a minute. It's exactly in your text, what you said. The person that remains enlightened, right?
Mm.
Person that not just gets there. I know, I understand, I have gotten there at certain moments in my life. I have not been able to remain there, right? And it's not even like I was there, so now I know you just do this, this, and that, and then now I'm there, right? They've come from such random instances of like what I was doing, there wasn't one path. There's a bunch of different paths. So it's not like I can just I just do that and then it happens, right? But the person that remains enlightened, it's like the way I kind of think about it. Again, the words, just always at a loss for the words.
Well, let me come in here.
You take it.
So at the end of the last episode we did, I thought that was the question you had asked, and I was sitting on that question, but you didn't really mean it exactly like that. And so I guess, like, again, the first question has to be for that, where my mind was going from that, what I thought was the question was, is it possible to stay that way? I don't think it is possible. There are certain schools that, schools of thought that at least would try to. I don't know if there's ever been, would you say like a Jesus character or a Buddha is an embodiment of enlightenment all the time? I don't know if they are, though. I mean, like, it's weird because we have to define like what, like, they might be wise about everything because they've gone to this place so totally. They're going to bring some of that back and integrate it. And now here they are, still a human being, the same Rickness, but now wise and knows not boom, boom, boom what to do, but as things happen, you can see into the situation in a total way because, you've been there, words. But I mean, I don't think you can stay there. There are people who want to stay there. And to that, like, that's one school of Buddhism. So like, how much have you gone into Buddhism as in like a scholarly reading books? And I know we talked about, karma, everyone knows that, but I mentioned samadhi to you one other time and you're like, it's not about the words, that ideology. Anyway, just a little history, I guess, as much as I know. But I would say in the Western world, what we think of as Buddhism would be what is the Mahayana Buddhism, the great vehicle, which is that bringing it back and giving it, helping out the others. That's that mentality. Now they, masters of this school, which is obviously the dominant one, the bigger one, they always talk about the other school as the lesser vehicle or the lesser school. And they're always pretty harsh on those guys. Like, those fools think that they can sit there, like zombies, and let their bodies rot away while there's this world here and that there's people that are suffering here. Those are the ignorant ones. Like, that's why they're the lesser school. So whether or not these people can do it remains to be seen. It sounds like if you could do it, your body would just rot away anyway. It would have no reason to continue functioning here. So I think we come back to what we've been kind of talking about all night, is that going there and then coming back and integrating it, which that book also mentions heavily. Whole chapter on integration. But that's that one little point on that, what I thought the question was. Where is the question tonight? Because
you answered both without even realizing it. My thought was on, I see them as the exact same question. And it's exactly what you just said. So imagine, again, let's go back to our sine wave. Neutrality line, and then you have the oscillation between the opposing values, right? I'm going to put enlightenment as on one side of the line, and I'm going to put not enlightenment, whatever you want to call it, on the other side of the line, right?
Mm-hmm.
For enlightenment to remain relevant, to remain a thing, to exist, for enlightenment to even exist, you need to not be able to stay there. If you were to stay enlightenment the whole time, what happens? You collapse that wave. There's no more opposite of it, because you've nullified that opposite. You've abolished that opposite. Because you're just remaining in enlightenment the whole time. You nullify it. You collapse that wave into the neutral line. Enlightenment is now a moot point that you don't even have to think about, because it's just that all the time. It's not even a feeling. It has no relevance. It has no comparison. It has no action. It has no meaning. It has no necessity to exist. And so you do have to get enlightened and come back, and get enlightened and come back and get it. But there is a frequency with which you can do it on a regular basis. Enlighten, come back, enlighten, come back, enlighten, come back.
Okay. Well, I'll put it this way, and I don't know where. This thought comes to me all the time. I thought it was such a profound line when I read it. And I think it's some Christian mystic. It might have been in the Perennial Philosophy, Aldous Huxley. Probably not, though. So I don't know what the question was to this mystic or this saint or whatever, but his response was, only go out 15 minutes. I'm saying, stay close to that spot where it's accessible. Don't go too far from there, because eventually, the world's going to wear back off on you, and there's going to be distance from that or whatever, and conditioning will keep that divided or whatever. So don't go too far away. So
that's why I'm saying you answered both. When I asked about stillness, and I'm using the word stillness, but there's also it was the one that's the zero at all times. The one that never a one, it's just always a zero. Right. The one that is always still. It's the same as if you're enlightened the whole time, you neutralize yourself, and therefore you are the stillness at all times.
Right.
And so the profound idea I had is, for me, for that, you were a one at some point, and then even if you became the stillness, if you became the zero, there was that point in time when you existed and then became a non. But in time. So then my question was, which I felt like was extremely profound, and I don't even know if you can logically contemplate it. What about the thing that is zero always?
All right, that's what I was going to say. All right, so and I hope people, if they're following along, will be able to reference our verbal models of that. I didn't know that was the Earth and the Sun. I just thought that was a model of the golden mean and the golden ratio, and it's the same thing or whatever.
Because it literally is.
Right.
And it just happened. It expands to the galaxy and the sun and the earth and everything. Yeah.
So from our point of view, where we are conditioned to be ones, I'm being kind of loose with the philosophy of it for the moment, but like we're born and we grow up as a one, and everything we do is on the sine wave. So it's, good and bad and whatever. And so starting off from the position where I imagine I've only ever been a one.
Yeah.
That's my starting point in this life consciously. That's just one point, on the wave. And so I project where I want to go to the opposite. So I imagine I'm a one, and I think that means that I'm not enlightened. I'm going to go for that. And that's the opposite or whatever. And verbally, like, that is what is going on. And it's just like violence and nonviolence. And that is, I think the wave is conditioning itself. However, whatever frequency it's going at, the wave is conditioning, and it's also duality, and it's part of what makes this dimension function. We've gone through that part of it. But so starting there, we're going to obviously, I'm not enlightened, I'm going to try to be that. And then that oscillation continues. But for the moment, unenlightenment is one point on the wave, and enlightenment is another point from my perspective of time and duality. But could it be that all along, the constant zero is the neutral point? And so it's not really like what I have to do now as a one to get face to face with the constant zero, let's call it. I can't do anything according to the wave. The wave won't help me. And in fact, I'll only ever revolve around it. So it's kind of the stillness comes back up, or the point where you sort of slip through, in the middle of what's going on here. So again, like, this is all words and all that kind of stuff. I mean, for the time being, enlightenment seems to be on the wave, but it's hard because it's like, it is, as we say it, as it's my perception that that's not what's going on. If I don't have that realization, then it seems to be on the other side of the wave, but
it actually isn't.
Yeah, I mean, and so when you slip through, you would have the realization that there is never any difference between sides of the oscillation and the constant zero, which is also ones of various frequencies and kinds and whatever. That all of that is, but to realize it beyond the one, that's what it is. And I mean, I think you can stay close, and I think you can, at least I think more so than conditioning yourself to be close or to go back towards that, I think the work could better be done on watching out for habitual tendencies to arise. Instead of saying like, I've got to institute this within myself, that I've got to become closer to that. I think if you just said, what are these things that keep me away from it, and negate those things, you will be, because you won't be jumping on the sine wave, really. It's kind of like, I mean, maybe you would, but I'm saying like,
I'm going to use like your striking own words.
A new note.
I want to use your own words to describe exactly what you're saying. It's that whole going into it, traveling to an alternate dimension. You're not actually traveling. You're in the same position. You're seeing the exact same things. You're perceiving the same vibrations.
Right.
You're just, it's like this switch of this flip of a switch in your brain that's adjusting your perception of it, even though you're actually looking at the same thing, right?
Right.
And sometimes I feel like that's exactly what it is. And that's exactly what I talk about in Life is Perfect, is that when I say we are all enlightened already, There's no reason to become enlightened. You're already enlightened. You are just not recognizing it to be such. The recognizing is the flipping of that switch.
Right.
It's there. It's all you have to do is recognize it, man. There's no habitual thing you need to do to get there. It's just there it is.
But we do need to find out like how we can recognize it by knowing what to look for, by seeing what it is not.
Yeah.
Well, that's not what I'm supposed to be looking for, so I'm going to continue on. And that's the tough part for anybody. You can have, like what were the other two aspects? I mean, so the conditioning part is the big one, but you said it's easy to just change your like not point of view, but sort of intention of a situation.
Yeah.
Is that how you put it? And then
intention is like a good word. I didn't put it that way, but that's definitely, it's like it's a good way to we've talked about this before, that line drawing of the cube, where you can alternate the faces that you're actually visualizing the cube having in front of the other face, right? And if it's just a line drawing, you can kind of like you can switch that in your brain so that all of a sudden this face is in front, and then you can switch it again. It's as easy as that. But
that part's easy.
But there's some people that, you probably met them. There's some people you show that and they go, I only see it one way. I can't see the dress as blue or gray. I only see it as blue, But then there's some people that could flip it on a dot. They're like, oh, yep, now it's this, now it's that, now it's this, that. And it's kind of, for me, enlightenment's the same.
Hardest. For everyone, it's going to be hard to go about the conditioning that question. But the hard thing is just that, I mean, whatever you say could not be pointed out to another who's unwilling to see that. But if they could, this is just like the easiest part of the whole situation. And it amounts to, though, and so I'm putting it positively, but it would amount to like just having faith. You could just say like, life is meaningless or whatever. Then you change your perspective and you can feel good about it. Like, I think there's a purpose here. Yeah. That's the easy part. And then because of that, it's going to have like a chemical change in your brain. You're going to feel more pleasant or whatever. Maybe that will help you into it. No matter what, into it, approaching that point is going to be like a lot of hard work, because you can't describe really how to do that or where to go. Yeah. So, but that is the point. That's like that's the kernel, I think. Yeah. Yeah.
And unfortunately, there's some people that they'll put a total block on even beginning that journey, because they'll listen to what we're saying and these guys are talking about aliens and interdimensional travel, and it doesn't make any sense. But it's like the moment, and there was a point where I was that person, but the moment I allowed myself to go, wait, maybe I am just a dumb human that doesn't know everything in the world. Maybe things aren't as they seem. Maybe and it's funny too, because a lot of those people believe so fully in science, and yet science, when you dive deep enough into it and learn the principles and the laws of physics and how atoms actually act, all of a sudden you're like, wait, that doesn't make logical sense. That is not how can
people trust scientists because they're taking care of something that they no longer have to do for themselves. Yeah. So like, I mean, they're not going to know that. Like, they might know, like, scientists know everything, and then when they say something, see, they said so. But if you tell them, but like, listen, if you get into the mind of a scientist, really, I feel like a lot of scientists would, not really have a definite thing at the end of their rope that they're going. There's still unknowns to them as well. I mean, I don't think people consider it like that, because there's a person who knows. And especially, dude, if I'm the person who's not a scientist, but I'm not, I'm trying to tell this to somebody and I'm not a scientist, and they only believe people based on their reputation, and I don't have one of those reputations, then it's, well, how would you know? You're not a scientist. But it's like, no, I mean, I can have a scientific mind and think critically and logically and look at things. I mean, and like that is so hard to ignite in people, but if you could get that, I mean,
yeah,
then you're on your way.
You're on your way. Exactly.
Yeah.
It takes that one moment where things there's something you believed so fully in, but then there's that switch in your brain that you do see the other side and you go, wow, how was I so wrong? Like how did I believe something so fully and it made so much logical sense at the time? And I was so wrong. Right. And it might take that happening a million times to you. Some people don't even ever realize it. Some people are just wrong so many times, and they even admit that, yeah, I was wrong a million times, and they still don't see that connection where they go, you know, I am just a limited being living in a limited world that is ever evolving, that is always changing. Even if I know something is an absolute truth in one moment, the next moment could change that completely.
Right.
And how you have any confidence in any ideology in this world is, at this point in my life, is beyond me. Because I'm like, for me, I go, I'm questioning even the fact that I'm speaking right now. I don't know if I'm speaking right now. Maybe I'm actually just blowing weird air puffs and that vibrating the air particles around me, like, and then we call it speaking, but it's like, I feel like there's a projection coming out of my mouth and going into your ear. And it's like, that's actually not how it works. You're massaging the air particles, which are massaging the air particles next to it, which eventually hit your ear and massage the little things inside your ear. And then turns into an electrical signal that your brain interprets as words. What the fuck, dude? Like what, how, what is that? Like, and so for people to go, I know so absolutely about this thing, that's where it's really hard to break down those walls. And like you said, it's kind of that moment that you go, well, how do I think? How does reality work? How does this existence work? And that's where, like you said, I like that term. You're on your way. You're just now the real vibrancy of life starts beginning, you know?
Because I think like another thing about just the general, outlook is that that with these, any new information or any ideology you come up against that is resisted, oh boy, I just lost it. Fuck. Tell me what you just said again. I mean, it was just like, it was so subtle that
ideologies, people holding on to them. I don't know how people can hold on to them. You're on your way once you start questioning the things of the world.
Right. On your way, man. On your way.
On your way.
It's just now like, I think people think that there's going to be like some new thing to be found out that will finish it or whatever, that everything will be different right away. But really it's just the beginning. But like, it's such a good, it would be so good to ignite that in another, man. I just like, and I want to bring this up real quick. I didn't talk about it since we didn't, get back into it. But the last podcast that I did with somebody else, you were on vacation. We haven't discussed this in this episode yet. That it's done, dude. I mean, it's not going to work. I just misrecorded it. So, but we were talking about the other person they wanted to talk about, basically robots and humanity. Like, what is that going to bring to this discussion we're talking about right here? And he wanted me to read a specific book, but I couldn't download it. So I was just like, let me just run with what I am thinking. And I went back to Krishnamurti talking about the future and computers and robots and what that's all going to mean or whatever. So I ended up watching this discussion. And it's been a while since I actually watched him talk, man. And it's just like, it's something else, like fierce, dude. Not like, threatening, but like, dude, for this little Yoda, man, he like so much power. It's crazy.
I love him.
Yeah. But so like, I don't know, the end of this situation, whatever, and when you read the the transcriptions of his dialogues, they like always have an ending that's something, not always, but a lot of the times have an ending that's kind of like, well, anyone? Yeah, I guess I'm done here. And he just like literally takes his mic off and drops it and walks away. Like he looks so disappointed that what he said didn't do it for anybody, like to that level of initiating this spark, this first thing where it's like, oh shit. Now I think that like most people going to see Krishnamurti back in the 70s or whatever, like they kind of had a little bit of that. Probably. I mean, how did they all get there? They had to travel to some remote place to go watch him talk on a stage someday. So they're probably onto it. But either way, it's the same. Like I saw, I'll have to send it to you. Maybe we can link it or something. It's on YouTube also. But the end, his face, you can just see it in this one little like wince. And he's just like, I'm done. Yeah. And that's a bummer. It's a bummer to see that out of him. I'm not like I'm disappointed at him, but that he feels he didn't get that, get it across.
I don't even expect it. It's like, I don't think anything I'm going to ever say is going to, maybe it will ignite something in somebody to finally see it and understand it and get that intuitive kind of fire lit inside of them where they can now traverse reality, seeing it anew for themselves, right?
Right.
I actually, because it's the way I kind of did it myself, I think it's more common and it's actually my preferred way, and maybe the way I think it, I feel like I would enjoy if it happens this way more, that somebody that happens to them, they stumble upon it themselves. And
right.
some either a train of thought that they're on, either an experience that they have, a moment of meditation, an epiphany. And then the best part for me is meeting somebody that's happened to and sharing it with each other. Sure. Like, it's kind of like when, I don't know, when you had a really good steak somewhere, you had a really good experience, and then you meet somebody that had that same experience, not even with you, not even the same vicinity, not even the same place. They just had that same exact experience, and they were so juiced about it. The same way you were juiced about it when you had it, that you share it and you can kind of relive that experience and reinvigorate it through the conversation. But it's not necessarily that you had to trigger it. Like,
well, okay, then I'll amend that, because all right, so that's one way or whatever. And I feel like that's why you bring it back, integrate it, and speak, however impossible it is to say. You're trying, not because like, oh, that would make me so happy if I could say it, but it would make joy because it was spread, like one flower to another, like, yes, for you, yes, great. And like, that's one way too. And then there's the way by yourself, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I guess when
I was just thinking it could, for me, the way you described Krishnamurti's face and his demeanor and the thing he's doing right there, I could impose that exact principle into his mind there as well, where it's like, it's not that I didn't get to anybody and it created that spark. It's more of like, does nobody else have this spark already? Yeah. Has nobody else came upon these principles other than me? It's like, it's like being alone in a room speaking to a bunch of people and everybody's interested, but nobody has shared that experience,
Right.
And it's not obvious that they have.
But so I think, all right, so there's these two ways now. I think, whether Krishnamurti is like bummed that it didn't happen or that, like, it seems to me that he rarely found another person that he would accept that it happened to. I mean, people would say things to him all the time. Well, this kind of thing happened, and he'd be like, no, that's not what this was. And so, like, I said this in another podcast, like I was saying, even Stephen Hawking, is dumb or whatever. Like I put it in that very casual way. But it seems to me that like, you know, when you read Krishnamurti and Bohm, even though they can get really deep together, I still always got the impression that K always was like, you got like 90% of what I'm saying. So like that's a part of it too about K is I think, I don't know. I mean, all I was really saying is that you can see that on his face one way or the other is, you know, to see the other person light up or to meet someone who is lit up in the way that he says lit up is, you know. I think we talked about this on other podcasts too. I mean, there was one book where, like, let's just pretend you have the oscillation and then like the constant 0 points scenario, that whole model, right? But there is a certain point, I gotta find where. I think I know what book it's in, but someone asks him like to go into this constant 0, what that is for him. And he said something like, there's so much more beyond even that. So like, and I don't know what that means, you know, because you hear like some of the most outlandish stuff already, but he's like, no. Beyond even that, I assure you, it gets much deeper. And like, he's referring to a point that's like, I don't know. This transcends even the transcendent situation that, you know.
Yeah.
I don't know. So he's got high standards, I guess. But I digress. I don't know. We're talking about talking to people and sharing this with people. I don't know. Where do we find ourselves?
That's a good question. It's one of those things that even people like Stephen Hawking, and I watched his this like kind of dramatized documentary about him, right? It was a movie that came out, I think it's on Netflix.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm remembering this incorrectly, but I'm going to say it anyway because it was something along the lines of this, where he had proved, quote unquote, proved the existence of black holes mathematically, right?
Yeah.
And he got that's how he got recognized. This is what he wrote a book on, and blah 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 blah. The next iteration after that dust kind of settled was he was going to prove that black holes did not exist. So even that's where there's some people where
that's pretty cool.
Like Krishnamurti with Bohm. It's like, you're only 99% there, man. But was he 99% there? Because maybe you just didn't hear that last 1%. Maybe you just didn't come upon that last 1%. I'm not saying Bohm, definitely, because I felt the same way listening to Krishnamurti and Bohm, where I really loved how much Bohm fed Krishnamurti during their conversations, you know?
Yeah.
And it's really, it's like Krishnamurti, he'd take the stage, he'd always kind of overshadow. But then, you just get thinking about that situation that most people don't know, that Stephen Hawking was going to prove that they didn't exist after he proved they existed. And it's like, it's not even the way they represented it in the movie. And again, I'm not there. I'm not talking to Hawking. I don't know. I want to read some of his books, but it almost felt like it wasn't that he was doing it because he found some new information or anything. It was almost like, I'm going to do it because I can, because that's just the way things are. And it's because they exist, they have to also not exist. And this is why. And so it was almost just like almost like not a joking thing, but almost literally like, most people don't understand this is how the world works. And this is going to blow their mind, and I'm going to see it seem absolutely insane. And that's funny to me because I see it. I know it. I understand it. Nobody else does. And it's nice being in that position, But at the same time, it's like there's people that they only show you the 99%. And because it is really hard to show the 100%, you know?
Yeah, I mean, verbally, I don't think you can. I don't think you
exactly.
Can. But I think there are people who are willing to show, 100%.
Yeah.
As best as they can. Some people are better at it than others, but...
Exactly, yeah. And some people get into moments in time. Some people, they can't display it. You know, Krishnamurti was very good at displaying it much of the time. But some people get there 50% of the time. And then the other times they lose it. And sometimes they don't know why, and sometimes they know why, and they just can't get it at the moment.
Mm-hmm.